What's up everyone? In a previous video, some of you might remember, I did promise you guys a more in-depth tutorial on how I digitize my artwork for machine embroidery. And that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to digitize the design you see on screen now from start to finish and show you how I do it using my digitizing software. This is going to be a long video, so you might want to grab yourself a cup of tea and a snack. We're digitizing this little ghost because the spooky season is upon us, and after this video is complete, the finished product will be available on my website to purchase. If you want to digitize along with me, then take a moment to screenshot this design, as I am going to be talking you through step by step on how to digitize using an embroidery digitizing software called Embroidery, which I'm opening up now. Embroidery is the digitizing software I mainly use, but there are other softwares available. If you do purchase Embroidery, you also need to purchase the Studio plugin, which has all of the digitizing tools which you will need to use to turn your photographs and logos into embroidery files. Also, just because the software I'm using is Embroidery, a lot of these digitizing practices and techniques can be applied to all forms of digitizing. So even if you do end up using a different digitizing software, then hopefully you'll still find this video helpful. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to set up my canvas or hoop size. I want my little ghost patch to be about 7 centimeters in diameter, and so I'm going to set my hoop up to be 8 centimeters. I click on the hoop icon, and that brings up this preferences box where I either have the option to choose from a couple of pre-made presets which relate to a lot of embroidery machines available on the market, or you can just input your own size yourself by left clicking on width and height and then just typing in whatever size values you want your hoop to be. So like I said, I want mine to be 8 by 8 centimeters. And then I click apply, and you can see by the ruler at the top of the screen that this hoop is now 8 by 8 centimeters. Also, as I'm going through this tutorial, I will be using right and left click to instigate different actions. When I left click, the little colour surrounding the cursor should be changing to a magenta colour, and when I right click, the cursor should be blue or cyan. So just in case I forget to say, if I'm left clicking or right clicking, the colours indicate what I'm doing. So next we're going to import our image onto our canvas by clicking image and then import. Then you're going to find your image on your computer and press open. When you press open, this text box comes up. Would you like to scale the image to fit your current hoop? Yes. And now this image is about 8 centimeters. Also, if you do end up doing digitizing along with me and you do sew this image out, I would love to see what you do, so please tag me in any final results. I'll leave my social media handles in the description below. How I like to digitize my designs for flat embroidery, so when I'm making patches and t-shirts, I like to start from the back of the design and work my way to the front. So I'll do the pale lilac background first, then I'll do the outline, as I find doing the outline earlier in the design helps keep the design shape and prevents distortion. Then I'll do the little ghosty and all of the other little bits on top. The main tools we're going to be using in Embroidery today are the fill stitch tool and the line drawing tool. Sticking on some funky shape. So you can see that's a fill stitch. And that's a line with some funky little stitches. You can do a lot in this software, and that's why I like it. But most of the stuff today is going to be quite basic. So starting with our fill stitch to create that lilac background, I'm going to go for starting around the middle of this outline, this dark purple outline. And I could either trace manually around the outline of the design by left clicking and dropping nodes and then dragging the center of the node outward to create that circle shape. Or a way I find is much quicker to do is to select the fill object, place down your first node, and then up here you can click on shape and it gives you a list of generic shapes. I usually go for the 8 element circle. They say the word elements is just another word for node. And then I just click and drag my circle to the width I want it to be, and then stretch it outward. And I have a circle quickly and easily made for me. You tap enter again, and then it generates your circle shape. The default color in Embroidery is like this light mid-blue kind of color. If you want to change the color of your objects so they're more of a true reflection of what is going on in your picture, then choose from the color palette above, or if you right click on one of the colors, you do have the option to choose from a much larger color palette, but normally I find their default colors are adequate enough to give you a general idea of how the image is going to look at the end. So I click on the color I want, I'm holding down left click, and then I just drag it on top of the object in the object palette. And I'm going to drag this out a little bit wider and you'll see why later on. Then to create the outline, we could either use our outline tool and just trace around the outline of the shape we've already created. That works fine, but again, it's quite a time-consuming thing to do. A quicker way is to select the shape you've already digitized, go up to convert, and then create outline from fill, and that creates a new object, an outline, and you can see it's a single stitch outline, but because this is going to be our border stitch, we want it to be a nice thick chunky satin stitch. Well, I do anyway, you can have whatever border you like. Right click, go to parameters, and then we are going to select satin stitches. And you have the option to change the width of your satin stitch, and because it's quite thick, I am going to change the width of my satin stitch to 3.5 millimeters wide, then press the green tick. And the way I did that was I left clicked on width, and that brought up the option to change the width. Or you can just left or right click on the number itself, and that moves the values up and down. Then when you press generate stitches, you'll see you now have a much chunkier satin stitch border, and I'm going to want to change the color of this to a different color, because otherwise the machine would stitch the whole of the two objects out in that light lavender color. Then I'm going to digitize my ghost. I'm going to start with the white. So you can either do the color after, or you can select it before you start creating your fill shape. And sometimes I find it's easier to zoom in so you can be like quite accurate to the outline of the thing you're digitizing. So left click to place your first node, and then I'm just dropping nodes around the outline of the white in the image, and dragging the nodes from the center Actually, sometimes I make a mess of things. Right in, easy peasy. Oh, if I ever make a mistake, for example, like I did just then, and I want to get rid of a node, the way you add and remove nodes is by pressing the plus and minus here in addition to the nodes you've already placed. So just going to carry on going around the outline of the ghost. Whoops. Also, if anyone was expecting this tutorial to feature a can of sardines, as was promised in a previous video I did, the reason why this isn't a tin of sardines is because that video ended up being 40 minutes long, and I thought that was far too long for a tutorial, and hopefully digitizing this ghost patch will be much quicker and easier to digest for everyone. So once I've gone around the outline of my ghost, I'm going to press generate stitches, and these white stitches are now being stitched directly over the lilac stitches behind. And that is a problem in embroidery because especially when I come to add these little pink cheeks and his black eyes, it'll be stitches over stitches over stitches. Sorry, that was my dog. And you'll find that your embroidery gets quite dense and thick, and this can sometimes lead to puckering or needle snappages. So if I just generate all of my stitches here, Embroidery has this feature called a density map, and what this illustrates is where your stitches are stacked on top of each other. So green is usually like one layer of stitches, which is good. Orange is where our ghost is sitting on top of the lilac stitches underneath, and anything red is where the stitches are getting a little bit too dense. A few stitches in the red are unavoidable, but we want to kind of minimalize it wherever we can, because not only can it lead to issues with puckering and distortion, but also it's a waste of thread. Like, there's no need for that lilac thread to be there because it's going to be hidden behind the white, and also the lilac thread might show through the white of the ghost, and that will kind of kill the effect. Although ghosts are transparent, but I'm not going to debate that now. So we are going to remove the lilac stitches from behind this ghost. And the way we do that is we select our little lilac circle, and then we use the cut hole tool, which you can see it looks a lot like your fill tool, but there's a hole cut in it. And then just trace around the outline of the shape you would like to cut out in your fill stitch. And I'm going to go further than just the white, because at some point we're going to digitize this black sort of skirt the ghost has, that shadowing, and there's no need for the lilac stitches to be behind that either. Then I'm going to tap enter, and you can see that there is a hole now. It's kind of hard to see, but you can see there's a cutout in that lilac circle which we made before. Now, if this design was bigger and maybe more complex, I would probably finish off digitizing the whole ghost before moving on to other elements of the design. Doing so kind of helps prevent shifting and registration issues within the design. But because the design is quite small, machine embroidery, because it's quite labor intensive, I'm always looking for different ways of like time saving within the design. And one of the ways to save time is by having as few colour changes as possible. And you can see these little leaves here are white, like our white ghost. And so I'm going to digitize these next before I go on to digitizing the black outline of the ghost. So I'm going to zoom in and just using my fill tool again, I'm going to trace around the outline of these leaves. And when I come across these kind of design elements where there's lots of similar colours but kind of spread out, I place my start point at the top of the object and I'll have my end point at the bottom of the object. So the stitches will start up here and then they'll work their way down. So I'm going to press generate stitches, and then when I do my next object, which will be this leaf here, we're going to start at the top. I'm going to digitize the whole shape first and then right click and place fill end point here. And another way of speeding up your embroidery is to have as few trims as possible. So if I just generate my stitches here, I want to create a connection between this object and that object. And when you create a connection in Embroidery, it starts at the end of the object before. So my connection will start here, and that connection will join to the start of the next object in the sequence. So I can either right click and hit create connection, or I can use this icon at the top here, and you can see a line has now been generated between the two objects. And this line is just going straight, it's going right up to the top there, and because this line is before this leaf in the sequence, this leaf will cover most of that line. You can see here there's still a little bit that kind of sticks out. It's not going to be hidden by anything. Like eventually I'm going to digitize the darker outline around these leaves, and I want all of my connections to be hidden in some shape or form. So I'm going to have to alter my connection a little bit. So I left click, I select my connection, and then I click the edit node tool. Now at the minute there's only one node, there's only one node in the middle of that connection, so I can only really like bow it, which is fine really. Like you can see that is going to be eventually hidden underneath that black outline. But if you can't just sort of bend your connection in underneath something to be hidden, then you can add a node, and now it behaves just like a regular running stitch, which you can edit, and you can manipulate that connection to fit exactly where you want it to be. So I am now going to continue digitizing these white leaves, not leaves, and then connect them. Oh gosh, right, it's easier sometimes if you zoom in. And then I will connect them at the end. Fill end. And if I want to create multiple connections, I can select my last object, hold down Shift, and then select the objects I want to select. You can see the little red scissor icon here. That means there's going to be a cut. And then I can press the create connection and all those connections are generated for me. But as you can see, the lines are all over the place. So now we need to edit these lines just like we did the first time so that they are hidden away. And that will make my embroidery look neater, and it also prevents extra trims, and so that saves time. It should make the stitching out a lot quicker. Also, I'm aware that I am digitizing on top of that lilac background this time. I haven't cut out a hole, but generally speaking, I only really cut out holes if there's a very large space that's going to be covered. For small objects like this, I don't really bother unless the embroidery is going to get very dense. Otherwise, it's fine just to leave them as they are. Okay, now before I digitize these, as you can see, it's the exact same shape. When I was drawing this out, I probably drew that one first and then just copied and pasted and flipped it, which is exactly the same thing I'm going to do with my embroidery. So I'm going to digitize this outline using my single stitch tool. I am going to digitize the stems first. Not the stems, I don't know what they're called. The detail inside the leaves. I'm going to do that first. And I'm using my single stitch for this, just a single running stitch, because I want the middle of the leaves to be a little bit thicker than just a single running stitch, but I don't want it to be as thick as the outline of the leaves. So I'm going to use a different stitch for that. But if I did it all the same stitch, then if they're constantly running backwards and forwards over one another, then it's going to get too thick and it's going to look weird. So I'm doing a single stitch here for my stems. Oops. I keep calling them stems. I'm sorry, they're not stems, but you know what I mean. I click generate stitches, and now I want to use a different stitch type for the outline of these leaves. I want to use a triple stitch, or a bean stitch, which is a little bit thicker than just single stitches stacked on top of each other. Now I'm going to trace the outline of my leaves. And this time we're avoiding that running stitch going up the middle of each leaf. Hope this will be cute. I think it will be. I also want to say as well, there are softwares out there that make this process a lot quicker. Like I said, I've just always used Embroidery and I'm very used to it, so that's why I keep coming back to it. But there are more sophisticated digitizing softwares available, and I would probably look into purchasing those as well, just to make your digitizing process a little bit quicker. Okay, now I'm going to press generate stitches again, and we're going to have a look at our 3D version of this design, just so you can see kind of the difference in how these stitches look. It might not come out too well, but in fact it doesn't come out very well at all. What a waste of time. But take my word for it, these outline stitches are going to be slightly thicker than the detail going up the middle of the leaves. And this is what I'm talking about, how there are better softwares, more sophisticated softwares available. But because I've been doing it for so long now and I've used all these different stitches before, I have a rough idea in my head of how this is going to look, and it's going to be subtly different. And lastly, I'm going to digitize this stem. Again, I'm going to use a different stitch type for this. I want this to be slightly thicker than everything else we've done so far, so I'm going for a sketch stitch, and I'm going to make it a little thicker, and I'm going to press generate stitches, and you can see that is definitely a different stitch type. Okay, now if I was to just duplicate all of these objects and then click transform, flip horizontally, it all ends up in a big jumbled mess. So what you want to do when you're flipping something is you want to select all of your objects that you want to flip, objects, group them together, so now it's one group, and then transform, flip horizontally. And then you can see all the objects stay in place, and you can just drag them into the position you want them to be in. And I want to have all of my white colours and my black outlines together to stop the needle from swapping back and forth all of the time on my machine and save time in switching colours. So we're going to ungroup this again, and you can see now it's all split back into individual objects. I'm going to select the three black coloured objects from this sprig, whatever you want to call it, leaf set, and then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go down to order and click to front, and that will bring those objects to the front of our object palette. So now all of the white objects are going to be stitched at the same time, and all of the black objects will be stitched at the same time rather than swapping needles all of the time. Again, if the design was a little bit bigger, I might not bother doing this because having perfect registration is more important than saving time. But for this small design, this should work just fine. Oh, also, always remember to save your design as you're going along, just in case you get a power cut or something. You don't want to lose all of your hard work and have to start again from the beginning. I'm still staying with the black colour. We're now going to digitize the ghost, so we're going to do another fill shape, and I'm going to digitize his little skirt, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. We're going to use a fill stitch for this and just follow around the outline. There. Now, before I generate stitches for this fill object, I want to talk about something else that's very important called pull compensation, and also your stitch angles. At the moment, the two other fill objects we've done is our lilac background, the white body of the ghost, and now we're going to be doing this black shadow in here. Currently, all of these fill objects only have 0.1 in pull compensation, and they're all running horizontally at a 0-degree angle. If you've ever machine embroidered things and there's been gaps between colours where you can see the fabric underneath, this is how you prevent that. Obviously you have to stabilise whatever material you're embroidering on properly as well, and proper stable hooping plays a part in it too. But in digitizing, you don't really want all of your stitches to be running in the same direction. If everything is running horizontally, then you're going to find that the material is being pulled in only one direction, and that can lead to distortion. You want to even the spread. I'll come back to pull compensation. For now, we're going to focus on your stitch angles. So for this black object, I'm going to set that to, I'm going to say a 35-degree angle. That's fine. And then I'm going to press OK. My ghost, I'm going to right click, go to parameters, and I'm going to set that to a 90-degree angle. I'm going to press apply, click generate stitches for his little skirt as well. And if I go to 3D, whoops, I need to generate the lilac stitches too. You can now sort of see that all of your stitches are running at different angles. So the lilac's going horizontal, the white is going vertical, and the black is going at a little bit of an angle. The second way of reducing gapping in your designs is if we go back to parameters, you want to increase the pull compensation, and you can do this at your own discretion. I usually like to do mine at about 0.4 for every one of my fill stitches. I must have already and the effect of increasing your pull compensation is in the name of it. It compensates for shifting in the material as your needle is sewing, and that makes sure that all of the edges of these fill stitches, they're going to neatly come together and there shouldn't be any gaps in between them. And now I'm going to carry on and do the outline of my little ghost using my line tool. With these two little lines, I decided to start up and work down, and then I'd connect them. I think this is just my digitizing style. In my mind, this is the most efficient way of the design being stitched out. It's a personal preference sort of thing. I think as you digitize more and more, you find ways of doing things that work for you. What I did there is at the bottom of Embroidery, you can see there's these different tabs. I went onto the vectors tab that only shows my stitches and not my image. Sometimes I do that if the normal mode is a little bit tricky to see where I'm putting my stitches. If I go onto vector, you can sort of see where all the outlines are, and it makes it easier to line things up. I think I want these two stitches to be a little bit thicker, but I don't think I want them to be satin stitches, so I'm going to go for a sketch stitch. Press generate stitches. And the rest of my outline, I'm going to start where that last sketch stitch ends, and then I'm just going to, actually no, I'm not. I'm going to start here and I'm going to work my way back around the outline of my design. because that way it should stitch out more smoothly. There should be no more cuts and joins. I think I should be able to sew this whole outline without making any trims or connections. Well, no, I will be making connections, but I won't be making any trims. I think I made a comment at the start about this video should be quicker than the 46-minute sardine tutorial, but now because I've yapped so much, I think it might be about the same time. I'll go to my vectors again just to see where the end of the ghost is and where the lilac starts. Because the satin stitch is quite thick, it'll cover any gap in that occurs anyway. So we're going to go into satin stitch, and I'm also going to increase the pull compensation on that a little bit, but I don't think I want this satin stitch to be as wide, so we'll bring it down to 1.5, press generate stitches. Yeah, that's what I wanted. And now I'm going to connect that satin stitch to the last running stitch, and I'm going to hide this connection under the satin stitch. Press OK. Okay, I'll also move that over a little bit so it's not underneath there. For his eyes, I don't want it to be a fill. Oops. I'm going to go for a column stitch. I could really cut out his eyes from the white body of the ghost, but because they're a column stitch and there's nothing else going to get overlaid on top, there's no danger of the white showing through, again because the stitches are running down at that 90-degree angle, and these eye stitches are running at a horizontal angle, so there's gonna, because it kind of forms a lattice, there's gonna be no bleed through of the white into the black. So I'll just copy and paste that eye, put it there, and I'm going to do the same for his sweet little cheeks, but this time I think I'll just do shapes. So if we make it like that, maybe make it a little bit narrower. If you want to rotate something, you can just right click and twist the object like that by right clicking on one of the corner nodes. Control C, Control V. I'm gonna put my, yeah, that works for that one, and then on this object I'm gonna put my end stitch there. Nope, that's my start point. Whoops. I put my end point there, and I'm gonna connect his two little cheeks as well. You'll barely be able to see that connection, and I'm going to select two, copy and paste, and I'm going to bring those over there. There we go, there's our ghosty. Save, just in case. Next, we're going to do the stars, and I gotta be honest, I'm not very good at drawing stars, and I'm even worse at digitizing them, so I'm just gonna do my best to trace around what I've done. It might not look very good when I stitch it out, but we'll generate this, see how that gets so thin. That's not right, you don't want that to be like that, but if we just carry on and then see if we can fix it. What would that look like? So if I went on auto column, 3D, oh, doesn't look as bad as I thought actually, but I still want that to be a little bit wider. So maybe if I just slightly pull these apart. Yeah, that looks cute. Okay. And then for these two stars, we're going to use a combination of lines, just single stitch. And if you don't want to have any kind of bending, you just want it to be like a straight line, you can convert your bendy stitch to line by pressing this. And now you can see that you're digitizing in a straight line. And if you want all of your digitizing to be like that, then you change it from the curve to the line in the parameters palette. And then last of all, I'm going to digitize a little circle on top. Just to kind of make it look like a little shining star. And I'm going to connect those two objects so there isn't going to be a cut. And copy and paste, put that there. There we go. For the moon, what I think I will do to get that nice rounded crescent, rather than trace it, I'm going to make a circle shape and press enter. And then I'm going to copy and paste that circle. So now I've got two separate circle objects. I'm going to overlay one on top of the other, adjust the size a little bit to get that kind of rounder looking moon crescent. Maybe make it a little bigger, like that. And then I can select these two objects, go to transform, down to shaping, and I think it might be difference. Yes. So I'm going to remove those first two shapes that I created and just delete them. And I'm left with a crescent, which I'm also going to make a column stitch, make it a little bit wider. And I think I'll put a pattern in this one, nothing fancy, just a fill pattern, but it's just going to look like a different stitch type from a regular fill. And now the last thing left for us to digitize is the text. Gosh, this video really has turned into a monster in length. I honestly thought it would have been done in about 20 minutes, but never mind. Hopefully it's been helpful to you guys. Let me know in the comments if there's anything else you'd like to know about in regards to digitizing. But to digitize these three letters, I'm going to use a combination of the column tool and the line tool. It took me a while to understand how the column tool works, but basically you put down your first node and then you put down a second node, and there's this dotted line here, and that dictates the width of your column. And then you work from point to point. So this node, just my second node, is currently selected. And then I click on the first node again, and you can see how it kind of behaves like a fill stitch, but it's just a little bit more of an efficient way of digitizing. And you don't need an even number of nodes in your column. And then when you click generate stitches, you can see, hang on, I'm going to change it to black because that's the color this letter is going to be. You can see then you've got that column stitch. And just follow the outline of the shape. So for this thin bit, I'm just going to draw a line. I'm going to go over it a couple of times to thicken it up. So it's just a single stitch line. And I'm going to press generate stitches. And then I'm going to carry on with my columns. Click generate stitches again. And then to connect these objects, I click on the last one or the first one, doesn't matter, hold down shift and then select the last object in this sequence, and then I click the create connection, and you can see my connectors have been generated, and the letter should look like that. And we're just going to do the same thing for the remaining letters. Every letter can be broken up into parts, and for this letter H I see 3 parts. You've got the first line coming down, the thin kind of bridge going onto that second thicker column shape where the letter kind of ends. But for that first line, I'm only going to digitize my column halfway down that straight bit, and then I'm going to go to the bottom of the letter and digitize up so that these 2 column objects connect in the middle. And then I will draw my thin straight line of stitches from where those 2 objects connect, because it makes the flow of the letter more logical, and it should look better because your digitizing is running more neatly and there aren't a lot of crossing over of objects or backtracking. Really quickly, I've paused the video because I've just noticed I've created a connection stitch between the moon and that first part of the S shape. You can see there's like a yellow running stitch going across the screen. Just select that connection and delete it. You don't need it. And then last object. And then hide that last connection stitch wherever it is. There we go. Okay, I think we're done. Yeah, I think that's it. So now we need to go back to our Embed editor. When we click on that, it will compile the file. And now we have the option to save our design. I always save mine as DST, which is the universal file format that can be run on any embroidery machine. And because I also have a brother, I save it as PES, and I also save it as TAP, which is the Happy Japan file format. To be honest, I don't think I need to save them as all three. I could just do DST, but this is just what I do. So I'm going to press OK, and then I'm going to save that to my USB stick, and I will meet you guys downstairs on the embroidery machine. The embroidery machines I use are the Happy Japan HCS2s and the HCU. For anybody who's been following my channel for a while, you'll know that I really love these embroidery machines, and if you'd like to find out more information about them, then there are plenty of reviews of these machines and demonstrations of them on my YouTube channel, so check out my other videos if you've got the time. Although if you have just sat through 57 minutes of this video, you've probably had enough of me for one day, but if you subscribe to my channel, then you will be notified of the next time I upload a video, and hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter than this one. To test out all of my patches, I embroider them on some craft felt, and I use 2 layers of a medium weight tearaway stabilizer to support the design. On my embroidery machine, this design took me about 20 minutes to stitch out. Like I said, if you do end up stitching out this design yourself, please tag me in the results. I'd love to see what you did, any improvements you made and things like that. Also, if you have any further questions, then leave them down in the comment section below. After stitching out the design, I do think I could have digitized the stars a bit better, so you might want to look at those before stitching out your own design. But once it was stitched out, I just pull away the tearaway stabilizer, cut the patch out with a sharp pair of scissors, and then to turn it into a patch, I will add some adhesive heat and bond backing on the back of the patch. And that would mean my patch is now complete and then ready to sell. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them down in the comment section below. If you'd like to purchase this patch from my website just as a physical product, then I will leave a link to the listing down in the description as well. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you found it helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.